an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Jane the Virgin, Season 2, Episode 16, Chapter 38. In this episode, Portia is dealing with some pretty terrible postpartum depression, and she seems to not appreciate the severity of that at all. Also, Jane and Michael are looking for a new place, and Portia helps, and it's precious. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Natalia for commissioning this episode. You guys, I've missed this show. There's a pretty big space between this and the last one and that one and the previous one. And I really do miss it when I'm away from it. So the thing that I want to deal with first out of the gate is the overall theme in this episode. And like every episode tends to have a sort of, I won't say every episode, but a lot of them seem to have like the sort of overarching lesson that everybody is experiencing and in different ways. And I do like that as a general storytelling technique. But this one was really particular in terms of basically it being about getting over yourself. I absolutely love this. And it's the sort of thing that's like, easier said than done, of course. But I wasn't sure what to expect. I really feel strongly a lot of the time about certain things that have to do with money because I grew up without money. And so I'll have a sort of like understanding of things that won't match up with other people's depending on how they were raised and what they think is polite and not. And so I had a really like knee-jerk reaction at the beginning of the show when Jane is talking to Rafael about how her and Michael can't afford a house in the area. And of course, my instant thought when she was talking about it with Michael was, well, Rafael should really pitch in. And then I thought, I bet Michael would not like that. But what wound up happening is they got to a point where they were willing to accept that help. Even though that's not the way it shook out, it was going to be something that she and Michael agreed to accept. And I feel like so often on TV and in books, there is a real, what's the word I want here? What I think of this is always like the Bella Swan effect, where you have people who are trying to almost keep like a moral high ground by refusing to accept help, almost always money, from people who have more than they do. And it is supposed to, in the tropey way, tell us that this person is a good person because material things do not matter to them. And I've always just been really resentful of that because it's so easy to behave if you are somebody who grew up comfortably, as if declining money and help is noble, when those of us who have actually been in need know that oftentimes there isn't a choice. You either accept the help or you get evicted. You accept the help or you don't go to the doctor, things like that. So I have a real strong feeling about the concept of refusing help. Even though I can have trouble accepting help, I have really tried to put that aside in the past few years of my life and be willing to do fundraisers for things and acknowledge that I can't cover stuff and I do need help if other people are able to. And I never want to put pressure, but I just want to be like, if you can, you know? And I am much more comfortable with it, even though there is a part of me that has that puritanical streak where I think that I shouldn't ask anybody for anything and I shouldn't accept handouts, quote unquote. I hate that term. So I do still internally struggle with it, and I'm not trying to pretend that I don't. But in media, it's just almost always portrayed, if somebody refuses help, as them being a better person for it, them being self-sufficient in a way that is very akin to the pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality of just like by sheer determination of deciding I'm going to make it on my own. You suddenly can. That's not how that works, you know? And it's something that this show is playing with, not as often as I would like, because I'm so conscious of the situation with class in America and the way that, but that's not something the show is super concerned about, but they can't ignore it because of the way that Jane's circumstances in life are so opposite of Rafael's. So they've got to like cope with that every now and then. And, I really appreciated Rafael just being like, I'm the kid's father. And I have got to, you know, the idea that I don't get any say in where he lives just because I'm not with you. And that would be entirely dependent on you and Michael providing a home for my kid that I'm not allowed to contribute to that. Like, I felt like Rafael was making good points, and it really did seem like he was getting through to Jane. Like, it felt almost as if Michael weren't a part of the equation, that Jane might have accepted his help in that moment, but she just knew Michael's pride couldn't take it. And I love the fact that it turns out Michael and Rafael are sort of more on the same page than we ever thought by the end of this episode. And I'll tell you what, guys, I was really suspicious. It wasn't at the end of the last episode. He tells Michael, like, fuck off. I don't believe my brother did anything. And he's doing this in front of his brother. And it didn't occur to me at the time, or maybe it did and I don't remember. But when I watched the previously on for this episode, and we were shown that scene, it struck me all of a sudden how sort of performative it felt. And I all of a sudden got like, wait a minute, are they working together? And then later when he comes in and like pulls Michael out and is like, you can't interrogate him without an attorney. I was thinking, it's really interesting that you're standing like really close to the door and making such a point about this. But I was doubting myself. I felt like it would be fun if they were working together, but I don't think that's what's happening here. And then it turns out it is what's happening here, and it was fun, and I'm delighted. I can't decide whether his brother is onto him or not. I don't think he seems like he is. I hope he's not. But I do really, really love any time that Rafael and Michael are able to put things aside to get over themselves. Really is what it is, right? And what we find out in the end, because they go and look at different houses, and this is it's so funny, you guys, because they go in the first house and they're like, this is so depressing, we can't live here. And I was like, I live there. I live in a house that looks exactly like that. Everything is old. There's probably mold in all the walls. You know, it's just like one of those things where there are things that are seen as a standard on television and portrayed as if everybody sort of lives in this spot. And if you are below that, what a bummer. And if you are above that, that was good luck. But most of you are here. And it's such a lie. Like, I just remember as I grew up and started to understand that a little bit more, how, like, bummed out it made me to realize that I thought everybody was at a certain level of living. And then to, like, the more people I got to know and the more homes I visited, really seeing that's not true at all. Like, that's a really high standard of living, because it doesn't look like a high standard of living. And frankly, it shouldn't be, you know, You've got appliances so that you can wash your clothes in your home and it's considered this luxury. You've got a space that's green that you can step out into, that's got a fence around it so that children and pets can play. That's not so much to ask. But we really do just behave as if all of these things are, the realtor is like telling them none of the shit on your wish list is going to happen. And what a shame that is, man. I don't feel like we're asking for very much in this world. And we're just told so frequently that it's too much. And it's just galling. So anyway, what we find out is that Petra, because I was thinking that they were trying to buy a house, and I kept forgetting about the fact that they were clearly renting. So Petra, it turns out, is very on Jane's side here, because Jane really, really wants this house that's about 35 minutes away. And everybody behaves as if this is unthinkable, which is just so hilarious to me. Look, I know that depending on where you live, that is a long distance. Depending on, their situation with sharing custody of a child, it does add a wrench to things. I'm not trying to diminish that. But as somebody who lives in a state that I couldn't cross in 6 hours at this point in my life, 35 minutes away, you're living real close. There's a point where Alba says something like, you don't need to live near your parents. And I was like, she's half an hour away, guys. She does live near her parents. What are you talking? Like, everybody was like acting as if she was moving to another state. That is not that far away. I'm sorry, but it's just really not that big a deal. But whatever, it's fine. So the moment where Petra gets in Rafael's face is just so beautiful to me, because he is continuing to argue with Jane, and he's actually in the midst of composing an email explaining how he isn't comfortable. And when Petra comes in, he says something about how they're trying to buy a house that's really far away and blah, blah, blah. And Petra snaps at him and tells him, after everything Jane has gone through, having this child in the first place and not pressing charges against your sister, all of this, and you can't let her live in the house that she wants? Are you fucking serious? And she is so righteous in this moment. And they have her, the whole theme in this episode is telling the story as if it's a Bible story, and so that she suddenly turns into a saint. And it is so good, you guys. I am so delighted with everything with Petra. I am so psyched about what they're doing with her character, and I find it really, really fascinating. So this later on, there is this absolutely perfect house that pops up. And both Jane and Michael think that it has to be subsidized by Rafael, because he says something about how confident he is that they will find something really soon, which to them feels, and this house turns up that is everything on their wish list, and it's within their budget. And of course, the realtor who has been in contact with them, when they finally show up, there's 12 couples there. And the realtor's like, where the hell have you been? I told you to get here right away. And Michael's like, well, we stopped to get something to eat. What the fuck? And he's like, guys, a place like this at this price? Come on. You have to fucking get over. Do you think other people aren't going to be interested? Are you serious? So he tells them, you have to write a letter about why you would be better tenants than the other applicants. And this is, of course, right in Jane's wheelhouse, in a way that I didn't even consider suspicious. I really didn't. They have assumed at this point that Rafael is subsidizing the rent. He has agreed to pay a portion of it if they put it up for rent at a certain amount and not tell them. They think that this is a very transparent attempt. And they're very surprised when it turns out that there's lots of people who are trying to get in on this. And they figure, because of the fact that there's all these other couples, that it must mean that Rafael isn't in on it, which I thought was interesting. But she writes the letter and they get the good news. And then we find out that it was actually Portia. She's the owner of the house and she's the one renting it to them at a very affordable rate. And I just love it. I really do. Like, down with landlords. It's such a bullshit line of work. I really find it disgusting. But if you're going to be one, doing it like this, where you're actually making something possible for a person who otherwise couldn't afford it, is like the only way. I love it so much. Amazing. I'm going to talk about Portia at large because her storyline in this is really interesting to me. Jane's having a hard time because Mateo isn't sleeping and he's actually waking up Michael's neighbors who complain. And I found that really funny because, like, a baby is a baby. It's not like somebody's dog where you can be like, well, just rehome them. It's a child and they don't know that it's not Michael's child. So they're basically like telling him to kick out his wife and child, which is not something that should be allowed. But whatever. So she's staying at the hotel. Jane is staying with her mother and grandmother because of that pipe that burst in their house, which it turns out it was a long time coming. And the damage is such that it will not be cleaned up in time for their wedding, which she wanted to have at the house, which is deeply puzzling to me. I never understand why people want to host weddings in their home. I just never, ever understand that. But fine. So she's staying at the hotel and she's walking up and down the corridor trying to calm Mateo down, which all I could think was that everybody in the rooms that she's walking past must be kind of infuriated. But she comes across Petra, who is like sleepwalking, it feels like. And we find out pretty soon what's really going on with her. But I definitely had a moment where I was like almost thinking, is she stoned? Because there's a way that her eyes sort of go out of focus when she's talking to Jane and then come back, and how she like holds her eyebrows up but her eyes are half closed, where I was like, that's a really good imitation of somebody who's on fucking heroin, because I had a friend who did heroin and this was just how he would be. It's almost like they're falling asleep in front of you kind of thing. And I didn't realize until later that it was just meant to be sleep deprivation. She's having a really hard time. And I really am so glad that they are exploring this with her because, you know, they had a bit of a thing with Jane and her relationship with Mateo, and I sort of wondered, are they going to do this? And they didn't, which was fine. But I'm glad they're taking the opportunity with the second mother. I think it's just a fun thing to do that I didn't step back and appreciate at first with Petra's pregnancy. That seeing the way that Jane behaves with her baby versus how Petra is going to behave is already fascinating just because of their different personalities. But then the completely different financial circumstances and the different career paths and the relationship status of each of them, it's going to be a really interesting dichotomy. And I am looking forward to seeing how this like continues to develop. But eventually, Jane, she talks to Rafael about this and then finally goes to Petra and is like, look, I don't think you're okay. And mom groups, I know that like they can feel really corny and frustrating and stuff, and that's fair. But they also like helped me tremendously when I was in the beginning feeling really overwhelmed and lost, and made me understand that like what I'm going through is not unusual. A lot of people feel this way. And it's so great because she tries to promise Petra that there won't be any stupid songs, or even if there are, that Petra won't have to sing. And then we smash cut to Petra having to sing her like introduction song, and it's achingly painful. Like, this is I totally get it, Petra. I would be avoiding this shit too. Oh my God. Are you kidding me? But anyway, at first, all of the moms are talking about how they wonder fairly often whether having kids was the right move. Like, just, the days when it's just too much, and why did I agree to this kind of thing. And it seems like Petra is feeling really like, oh, wow, okay, like there's a moment of openness there. But when they start to go around and talk about things, and she says sometimes it feels like my kids would be better off without me, that is when they kind of go, hold on, girl. That's not true, right? Like, that's sounding very much like postpartum depression. And she gets really, really defensive. And it's so difficult because this is just the kind of thing that I know we are getting better about as a culture. But when you watch these sorts of things set just a short time ago, the way that our attitudes have changed so dramatically toward the concepts of mental illness and therapy is remarkable. We've had whole TV series that center around how transformative therapy can be. We have the Crazy Ex-Girlfriend series, which is all about mental illness and grappling with that. Ted Lasso also is very centered around that. A couple of the best series you've ever seen, Fleabag as well. And here, her defensiveness, it's like she thinks that it's some sort, she keeps talking about how everybody's being really judgmental, and Jane has to keep saying, we are concerned, emphasizing, we're not judging you. We are worried. This is a problem you don't have control over. Because she's sort of taking it as an implication that she is somehow weak, and that is so often the way that people take it when you try to suggest maybe they are having a mental health issue. I'm not crazy is one of the first responses, which is just, first of all, what does that word even mean? But secondly, nobody fucking said that. I have anxiety, depression, and ADHD. Hi, I'm a cocktail, as are many people. I take drugs because my brain is fucked up. That is not my fault. My brain is fucked up because of the way that I developed and was born, as would be having a club foot or, being born, and anything that is different than average. We accept if it's physical in a way that we have only very recently started to accept if it is mental. And we don't like to admit how much of an effect our hormones have on our brains. We have this thing about control and acting as if everything is under our control, and it's fucking not. And pregnancy changes everything about your body. There's just a real attitude, I think, that, and it's tied in with the control aspect and the mental health thing, but we really seem to believe that pregnancy is just not a big deal in our modern age because of the advances in medical knowledge and technology, that it's always safe and there's never an issue usually. And that's really, really untrue. Pregnancy is still very dangerous. But setting that aside, the effect that pregnancy has on the body and that childbirth has on the body, it is something that is so diminished. And I didn't realize it until I started talking to friends who had had kids and realized how frequently this was discussed, because it's not portrayed adequately in media about how many women just after pregnancy, they just can't hold their bladders anymore. And eventually maybe they get to a point where they can, but wearing poise pads is a super common thing. And it's often just treated as normal. Oh, well, sorry, that's how you live now, because women's health is not really prioritized very much in research and it is not funded well. And oftentimes, like, the sorts of studies on the drugs that we're taking weren't even conducted on women to begin with. So what I'm saying is, postpartum depression is not a character flaw. It is not a moral failing. It is a side effect of occurrences in your body that you have absolutely no control over. And I hated seeing her get defensive as if people were critiquing her as a person. Especially considering that she's saying my kids would be better off without me, which you don't get more judgmental than that, Petra. Which we then see after she has this conversation with Jane. Jane gives her the number to a doctor that somebody else recommended. And this woman she talks to, and the doctor is like, yeah, you do have a lot of the symptoms, but you probably want to talk to your mother about whether she experienced these symptoms too. And all I could think was, you absolutely do not need to talk to your mother about it. I understand the doctor saying that you might want to find out, but I really think it would be best if you didn't do that. But of course she does. And her vicious fucking cunt of a mother says exactly the thing that Petra's worst voice in her head has been thinking, which is that children would be better off without you. You and I were not meant to be mothers. And really, the implication there is that, yeah, her mother did have postpartum depression. She did have difficulty connecting with Petra. And she judges herself the way Petra is judging herself right now, but she lashes out instead and makes Petra doubt herself. And then we end the episode with Petra packing because she's going to abandon her children, which is horrifying for so many reasons. And I just really, really feel for her, because this sort of like gray, like, I think of depression like this as a whirling mass of like gray, cold water that is just sucking you down. And it is so loud, it drowns out everything else. It doesn't give you a chance to breathe. And it feels totally insurmountable. This feeling I know very well. And her wanting to run away, it's just devastating, considering especially that she has access to like help. She's not in a position that so many women would be in where they can't afford therapy, you know? But even so, if she doesn't have a support system from family that helps her the way that Jane does, clearly, despite having money, she feels alone. So I just really appreciate that, because Jane's family just, I'm not trying to say that makes up for being broke, because obviously that's its own problem. But the difference in the way you feel about yourself and the problems you're facing when you've got a crowd of people who believe in you, backing you up, versus Petra, who she isn't with Rafael, and he like came to her in the middle of the night after being dumped by Jane, which feels like shit, and is failing to connect with these children, and her mother's in fucking jail. I mean, all the circumstances are aligning to make Petra feel as alone as possible on top of everything. So yeah, I just really like her story a lot, and I'm really interested to see where we go with this. Oh, sorry. Lauren is saying, Lauren says, notice they don't even say depression. They just say postpartum, which is a shorthand that people use, but I found it interesting that they didn't. You know, that's an interesting point, Lauren. Yeah. They like later on when Petra goes to see her mother, she says depressed, and her mother is like, was I depressed? I was in Czechoslovakia, and I had just given birth to like a girl in the 70s. Yeah, of course I was depressed. Everybody was depressed. So they say the word a lot there, but they don't say it so much in the session. And that's an interesting point. I wonder about that. And then Lauren says, I could also see that for Petra, that there is some embarrassment about the way she went about getting herself pregnant, and now she can't handle it. It makes a lot of sense. That's actually something that I hadn't considered, and you may think me a fool, and so be it. But being really like sheepish about the fact that she did this to herself without permission and thought she wanted it so bad, and now here she is and regretting everything, and she feels like an idiot. I didn't even consider that. Well. If it isn't the consequences of my actions. So yeah, the whole thing with her, God, this will be very fascinating to watch unfold. All right, so next I'm going to do the light one, and let's talk about Alba. And what is the name of her suitor? Enrique? I can't remember even. Well, I'll find out in a second. But we have, like, the way the episode opens is the flashback, because remember, we're doing the Bible theme. So in the beginning, there was Alba and Mateo in Miami. And at first, the house was charmless and empty. And Alba said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And I love when she's, like, looking around and she just says, "That's it." Because that's often the way, isn't it, with the places that we can actually afford. I'm going to say also, Mateo was fine as hell. Look at him. He's so cute. Good Lord. So, jumping ahead, begat Jane, who begat Mateo, blah, blah, blah. And so Alba, like Noah before her, said, 2 of everything, and then it's off the breakfast menu. And I love this. They're staying at the hotel, and Rafael is footing the bill, and they are starting to get quite spoiled. I am into it. Do you guys understand how much I hate when people don't want to, like, indulge in stuff that they're being offered for free? You guys know, if you've listened to Twilight, again, you know, Bella syndrome. But the fact that they are out here, not only like getting these amazing meals, but we find out that Shamar has been to the spa twice already. Amazing. Yes. It's not actually like costing him that much money. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just in the scheme of things, it's not even like he is paying retail on what he's just paying at cost from the back end. So it's like, just, it's fine. I emphasize it is fine. I love it. But yeah, so they're having this amazing breakfast, and this is when Jane comes in and tells them that they complained about Mateo, and so now she's staying here. And Pablo, that's his name, Pablo comes in. Apparently, it's the 3rd time that a door handle has come off when he has pulled it. So Pablo, this is just really funny, actually, in a way. Pablo goes out with Alba again, and they have an amazing time, and the chemistry between them is fierce. And he wants to take her, you know, somewhere a little quieter. And she tells him, "I only want to do that if we're married. I hope that's not a problem. I would be very hypocritical if I were to hook up with you after the way that I have been preaching to the, you know, my daughter and her daughter." And he gets this sort of expression on his face that I thought was going to turn into the next, like, scene with Alba, that she had been dumped, to be honest. He really looks unhappy. But the next episode, or the next scene with her, she's coming in to tell them that she's getting married. And this cracked me up, because this is something that, because folks have very different value systems from mine, a lot of people probably wouldn't think that this is so bad. And it just goes to show the difference in the, like, priorities that we all have. what happens when you insist that people be married before they have sex is they get married far earlier than they are ready for, simply because they are horny for each other. Either that or they have sex anyway before marriage and it turns into a whole thing. But this sort of thing, if you're somebody who really sticks to your rules, you would let the fog of sexual attraction, and it is a fog. When I call it that, I mean it. When you have this kind of chemistry with somebody, it absolutely infects your brain in a way that takes over all of your common sense. It's like being drunk. And I just remember so clearly the times in my life where I was caught up with somebody that I had this sort of like really strong sexual connection with. And it would be like I couldn't stop thinking about it. It would be like all day, everything I did was about that person and how I could get to have sex with them as soon as possible again, or how I could get to have sex with them at all. And everything that I did, it felt like it was filtered through this, and it's such a strong motivation because biology. So people choosing to get married before they're ready so that they can bang? Yeah, that's a thing. So she's out here saying, I love him. And he's been here like 2 days, you know? At one point, Jane is like, they've only known each other a week. And she's like, well, on the contrary, we've known each other for 30 years, you know, whatever. Longer than 30 years. But I was like, did you though? Because it just does really sound like. And they decide, Jane and Shamara, to just be like, all right, you know what? If she's happy, fine. Let's just let her do what she's a grown woman. Which I appreciate. But then Jane and Shamara get off on the wrong floor and they see Pablo giving one of those fucking paper roses to a strange woman who turns and walks into her hotel room, and he follows with a real look on his face and like adjusts his belt. And I loved the way this was set up, because there are times when I'll be watching a scene like this and it seems so clear to me that there is an alternate explanation for what you are seeing. Sure, if you wanted to take it at the very surface value that this guy is cheating, then you could, because you're not looking at the body language or whatever. But they made such an effort in this scene to have it be unmistakable. This woman is definitely being seduced. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about the energy between them when he gives her the rose. The whole vibe, there is no question in my mind that this is going to turn out to be, oh no, you simply misunderstood. Absolutely not. And I wouldn't believe it if they had tried to pull that. I would have been like, get the fuck out of here. Yeah, he's cheating instantly. And they just immediately go tell Alba. And I appreciated that they did, because, you know, they could have sort of hemmed and hawed about what to do, but it feels like there's no reason to do that. It's very clear what the right thing to do is here. And so they tell her, and she admits that she was horny, that was a big factor. And I just love that she says that, especially after the shame that she has heaped on Shamara for so much of her life for having sexual desire. Her just admitting that was a factor is a really big step for her as a person, you know? It's just treated as so shameful that women have sexual desire. And it is just goofy, man. It's so sad, like the way that we have just poisoned something that can be as joyful as sex can be and made it like this fucking issue, you know? It's wild. But yeah, so Pablo out of the picture. I'm very glad, because the whole thing with his like being bad luck was truly giving me such anxiety. And I love when Alba confronts him. I think they're in the lobby of the hotel. They're in front of a lot of people. And she says, "You don't carry the curse, you are the curse," which was a great line. And she just makes this huge scene. It's all in the spirit of the like extreme telenovela thing. And it's great. I really, really loved this. So, okay, now let's talk about the wedding. Because Jane, like I said, really wants a wedding at home with no more than 75 people, which like I already said, I don't get people wanting to get married in their homes for so many reasons. But honestly, when she said she was going to have 75 people at their house, I was flabbergasted. In your house? Are you kidding? Are you where? They've got this like little front area with their swing. We never saw a backyard. Where are they fitting 75 people? What are you talking about? Finding out that was her original plan. Anyway, it's also, I haven't ever like been in a house that I just grew up in my entire life. So I think maybe it would make more sense to me if I had a connection to a home in that sense. But I have moved around, as have most people. And so I don't have that feeling about where I grew up as being this thing. But because of this issue with the plumbing, there's no way they can have the wedding at her house. So it turns out that Rogelio is going to be paying for the wedding because he's doing much better now financially and he wants to pull out all the stops and he wants to invite tons of people. And Jane is really, really agitated by this. And this was one of those storylines where I went back and forth a little bit on whose side I was on. Because at first, Rogelio is so pushy that I was like really irritated. I'm just like, dude, it's her wedding. Will you fucking chill? There is a point where he says, "But I'm paying for it." And she's like, "What do you mean?" And she gets very offended because what she's hearing is him saying, "I'm paying for it, so I should get to say what happens." But he's like, "Well, I'm saying I'm paying for it, so you don't have to worry about keeping the guest list small because I'm paying for them. Like, please don't even think about that." And I actually believed what he meant. I don't think he was trying to like cover his ass. I think he genuinely was trying to say, you're attempting to be frugal as if it's going to upset me that you're spending my money. And I'm really trying to get you to understand that's not a factor for me at all. But understandably, Jane sort of tries to take it away from him and be like, "Look, Michael and I are just going to pay for the wedding," because he won't listen to her. It's not even like at first when she says 75 people, he doesn't even understand that she means 75 people total. She thinks that he thinks that she means he can only invite 75 people of his own. And even that is like unthinkable to him. And then when she clarifies, he's just like, what? It's very funny. So initially, I was irritated with him for being so pushy. And then as things kind of went on and he was describing the kind of party he was thinking of having, a part of me started to be like, this just sounds fun now though, Jane. Like, And I started to be like, maybe loosen up a bit, girl. And then we have a really great scene with her and Shamara that it started off with me thinking initially like, wait, hold up. Because Shamara is like, well, it's not all about you, is it? And Jane's like, my wedding? Yeah, it kind of is. And I was very much on her side. I was like, yeah, literally, when do you get it? When does any woman get a day that is more about them than their wedding day? Like socially. It almost never happens. And Shamara is like, okay, yeah, the wedding itself, invite only the few people that you want to be there. The ceremony. Nobody wants to go to church. They don't want that part. People like the party. So have the small ceremony and then a big fucking party afterwards. And that way you get what you want and your father will get what he wants. And also, please keep in mind that he wasn't in your life. And he didn't get to throw you any birthday parties. He didn't get to throw you a quinceañera. He didn't get to do any of the things that are milestones in your life that fathers are supposed to be involved in. And he's trying to kind of like make up for that a little bit with this, and maybe just consider that. I loved her putting it in those terms. I hadn't even considered that. I really hadn't. But it makes so much sense, actually. Like, of course, he's lucky that he met Jane before she got married so that he could even be involved in her wedding, because he might have missed this too if things had gone differently. And it just recontextualized everything about it. And I really enjoyed how she tries to make a rule where he can only invite people she's met. And so he invites, like, I think it's the entire staff at some video store to the set for her to meet, so that he can invite all of them and claim it's because she met them all, which is just darling. I love it so much. So she finally tells him, you know what? We're going to have the party, the reception, be what you want it to be. Just, he says something about how they could recreate Versailles. He says not to scale, but even so. And she's like, okay, not that. And he brings up a barn, which is, I got married in a barn, but it wasn't a barnish wedding. And you can go to my Instagram to see proof of that. But she tries to just be like, okay, yeah, maybe. And like leaves him to look through some things without her. And he goes to Shamara. And when Shamara had tried to sort of step in on Jane's behalf to talk to Rogelio, he really pushed her away in a way that felt for me like kind of mean-spirited. He says something like, you broke my heart and it's getting really embarrassing having to explain that over and over again. And I was like, yeah, but this isn't about you. It's about Jane. Like, it was very much a get over yourself kind of moment, even though I wasn't thinking of it that way at the time. And at this point, he goes to Shamara and is like, I need your help with this wedding. I want to do something Jane will love. And I'm sorry for the way I've been acting. I was hoping that if I like distanced myself from you, it would make you really miss me enough. And he doesn't really finish that sentence. I think he just says enough. And it's clear, like, that we would get back together. You know what I mean? That she would change her mind about kids. Like, but I liked the fact that he admits that, because so many people do this sort of thing without ever really admitting to themselves what it is that is their ultimate motivation and goal, because it's silly once you actually say it out loud. And so he gets Shamara's help, and then he goes and brings Jane to the place where she's going to get married, and it turns out to be a set built to look like her house, with the studio as the reception area. So the ceremony would take place in the, and it's so great because it's clearly like it's got to be the set, right? The actual set that they use for the show. But the whole way that this is set up is so great. I loved this idea. To me, wanting to get married in her house is weird, but it's clearly what she wanted. So him like deciding to really deliver on that for her, it should have entered my mind when he says like, we can construct Versailles. I should have thought of this, you know, but I just really love that. And, it's a really sweet moment between the two of them. And we also, there's this like bit at the end where Shamara and Alba are talking, and I think Jane's there as well, actually, at that point. She winds up leaving, but they're all sitting together and they hear, it's one of those moments that I love every time it's done. It's like a joke that never really gets old for me. There are two types of jokes that consistently hit. It's going to be this one, and it's also when people say words slightly wrong. for whatever reason, that always fucking gets me. But when they have this moment of like pretending that the music is it diegetic? I can't remember the words, but there's a term for music that is supposed to be happening within the scene that the characters are also hearing. And the music that is like the score playing over that the characters aren't hearing and the audience only is. And I love the joke where you think the music is for the audience and then the characters acknowledge it and go like, where is that coming from? Or the camera pulls back and all of a sudden there's somebody sitting there playing an instrument that you didn't know was in the scene. Like, it always makes me laugh. Every time. So when Alba's looking around, she's like, what is that music? That's really beautiful. And it's Charo. And Charo has been throughout this episode. What a delight. I'm so excited that they like got her in here. And I had forgotten, Charo is like one of those people that she's sort of like a Dolly Parton, but like Latina, where her aesthetic and the sort of over-the-top personality paired with that really extreme aesthetic in terms of pop culture sort of overshadowed her actual skill. Does that make sense? Dolly Parton is often just thought of as, yeah, she's a country singer, but mostly what we think of is she's got giant fake boobs and bottle bleached blonde hair. And that's what we think of. And we don't really like acknowledge a lot of the time what an amazing songwriter and performer she is. She's also just an awesome person, but setting that aside. And I have seen Charo, like, watching vintage television growing up, but I don't think I ever actually saw her in anything performing, like playing the guitar. She was always there for a sort of like laugh and a joke and to shimmy her hips, and so it just be like a bit of a curiosity, And I was genuinely stunned at how beautifully she plays the guitar. I was like, what the fuck? I didn't know this. So anyway, Charo, wow, what an MVP. All right, so I'm just trying to make sure that I'm not forgetting anything else here, because there's I want to just ensure that I covered all my plot bases here. I guess I did talk about the thing with Michael and Rafael, but the main thing is that after all of the sort of subterfuge, it turns out that what Rafael's aim is to keep his brother in town, and tries to tell him, like, I'll find you a job, because his brother is sort of, seemingly at least, at loose ends. And I wasn't really sure what, like, this dude strikes me as full of shit. This is the thing. This dude, what is his name? I don't remember. But he isn't filling me with confidence. He's just got a real sort of douchey energy to him. And I can't tell if it's just that he's a douche because he just grew up quite privileged and that's just part of, the side effect there. Or if it's because he's a fucking liar. And it's clear Rafael can't quite, like, he isn't certain about him. But yeah, I'll get you a job here. Stay. And he looks at Rafael and he gives it like a little bit of a nod. It was definitely a moment for me where I sort of thought, is he even agreeing to this? Is he buying it? And we cut to Michael, and he's listening to the conversation, and the way the narrator plays it is like, oh, he's tapped Rafael's phones. But once I saw Michael doing this, I was like, oh no, there's no way this is accidental. Like, he's definitely actually paired up with Rafael on this. But, oh, his name is Derek. Derek's response to Rafael saying, I'll get you a job is, why would you do that? And Rafael says, like I said, we're family. And we don't actually hear what Derek's response to it is, but later on, when the two of them talk to each other, he has succeeded. But again, I am not certain whether to believe that Derek actually bought Rafael's story. It just felt like, and what they plan to do is get him set up in an office, and then they'll bug the place and hope that he does something from the office that they can trace somehow. Which, I don't know. I can see that working, and I can also see it being almost too easy. Like, if he is still in contact with his mother, and if it turns out that he's been working in the criminal underworld for a while, I don't know that a job he found through his brother, that he's going to be foolish enough to be using like the phone and for crimes, basically, and meeting like associates there. Maybe he would. I mean, I'm sure it depends on the context of everything and how separate it feels from Rafael himself. But it just seemed like a bit of a reach to me. But yeah, Rafael is talking to Michael and says, I need to know what he knew about my mother. So I'm not having second thoughts. Let's do it. And this is when Michael says, hey, thanks for, agreeing to let us move to that house in West Miramar, even though, we're not. And Rafael says, thanks for not moving there. Anyway, I'm sure you'll find a place soon. You guys just started looking. So that's the convo that leads to Michael thinking that the listing that they found is from Rafael because of the way that Rafael assured him, no problem, you'll find something. And yeah, this house, 2-car garage, wood floors, 3 bedrooms. It's like, it's very cute. It looks like there's an orange tree in the front, which I should look into whether or not I could grow an orange tree here, because we are in a pretty hot climate and it gets very humid. So maybe. But yeah, so this, like I said, Michael and Rafael working together is one of my favorites. I also want to mention, I'm running out of time here, the ways in which Jane's doubt about the houses they're looking at are depicted are so great. She has like the door knockers talking to her, the little figure at the top of the fireplace. There's a parrot or something that's like on the wallpaper in one house. It's fantastic. I love whenever they bust out this magical realism stuff. It's just so easy to forget that this is an element of the show. And every time that they do it, I'm like, oh, right. That's a fun little thing they throw in there sometimes. And I think it's whimsical and delightful. And I love the fucking sassy ass bird on this wallpaper. That bird is very funny. I don't know whose voice they're using, but they are very good. All right. I'm going to wrap this one up. It's surprising to me, like, when I really look at the plot lines here, these were fairly easy to sum up, actually. I was, normally I'll be over time, but I feel like everything here was fairly compact, actually. So I don't believe I missed anything, but maybe I'll remember as soon as I sign off. What can you do? All right, guys. Thank you again so much for hanging out with me, for listening. Thank you again to Natalia for commissioning this. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
an Unspoiled Network podcast.